Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome back to the Leaf Peepers Quilt Along. Today, we're going to start free motion quilting on this quilt, and I'm going to teach you two different really simple designs, sharp stippling and Paisley Shortcut. They're super simple, and the best thing is they add a beautiful fall kind of swirly, whirly, flamey texture to the surface of your quilt. So let's jump on the machine and learn how to quilt these designs together. So we're ready to start quilting sharp stippling, and I'm going to fill it through this green area. And I have already secured this by doing this echo ditching with my rulers, and you can learn how to do that in the video I shared last week. Now as far as my settings and my foot, I've got just a regular darning foot here on my machine, and I've clipped this one open so that way I can see the needle really nicely, and I've changed my settings to have stitch length 0. That's the only thing I've done. I have not dropped my feed dogs. I don't do that for free motion quilting. So I'm just going to make sure my foot's in the down position and then use my hand wheel to guide the needle down all the way back up, and I pull on that top thread to bring up that bobbin thread to the surface. I do that every single time I start stitching, so that way the bobbin thread doesn't make a mess on the back of the quilt. Now I'll drop the needle back down exactly where I want to get started. Okay, so sharp stippling is a design, it's basically like stippling, only we're going to come to sharp points. And the absolute simplest way you can think of it is just kind of a wiggly flame shape. Think like V's. So here I'm just going to go with the very simplest version of the design. Notice how fast I'm running the machine. I kind of got started and put my foot down in a major way. Let's see if I can slow down just a bit. That's the thing about free motion quilting. You know, if your machine ever kind of takes off on you a little bit and you don't feel like you can control it, you might have a speed slider on your machine that you can adjust and slow things down a little bit. That might help. So there we go. Now I'm a little bit more controlled, and that means I'm also moving my hand slower too, so that way my stitches stay roughly the same size. Free motion quilting is one of those techniques where your machine isn't doing the work for you. We're not, letting the machine guide the quilt evenly through it. Instead, we're creating this design. We're guiding it through the machine ourselves. So that means that the stitch length, the size of each individual stitches, is created by balancing the speed your hands are moving with the motion of that needle going up and down. And you're kind of doing a third thing at the same time. You're balancing speed, you're moving the quilt, and you're also trying to figure out what you're stitching, what design you're forming all at once. And this can be a little bit tricky, so please feel free to mark this design in this area. That definitely makes it easier. But you can see the rules of the design are very simple. We're wiggling around and coming to sharp points. And I like to make kind of long, flamey kind of shapes. I really like this design. I think it fits well with our fall theme for this table runner or wall hanging, whichever one you're making. Now my stitches are just getting a little bit big, so I'm going to put my foot down a bit. Because once your hands kind of get comfortable and are moving at a set speed, then you kind of want to just put a little bit more pressure on your foot pedal so that way those stitches stay nice and small. And as far as what size of stitch is best, I think it's just whatever size you like. If your stitches start looking kind of chunky and big and your curves don't look curvy, they kind of look clunky, then that might be a sign you want to try for smaller stitches. Smaller stitches can be created by slowing down your hands and speeding up your machine. Now, if speeding up your machine just makes you feel kind of wild and out of control, you can also just, if your stitches are looking big, you can just try and consciously slow down your hands moving, and that can work too. Now, notice that I am filling this entire area basically kind of in a row. I kind of wiggle in one direction a little bit, kind of get a little bit of distance on the lower edge of this quilting space, and then I'm going to swing up and wiggle around up here and form, another little wiggly flame shape up in that area. And I do that intentionally. I'm working from left to right, filling the space completely so I don't leave little gaps or bubbles in there that I'll have to kind of try and wiggle my way back to and fill later. By filling the entire space at once, you're moving in a very logical way, and yeah, you don't leave anything to have to go back and have to worry about after you are completely finished with that quilting. Another thing that helps is to move in a direction that really works for your brain. For me, that is left to right, just the same way that I write on a piece of paper. I fill my quilts in rows, and this is how I do this in just about any type of quilt. I'm going to be using sharp stippling in the background in a later video, and you'll be able to see how that works too. But pretty much all the time, no matter what design I'm stitching, I'm always thinking and figuring out ways of stitching it in rows through the quilting space, so that way it fills very efficiently. I don't leave gaps in the areas, so that way by the time I finish quilting through that entire space, it's nicely finished. I don't have to worry about going back and travel stitching and going back to something else that I might have missed. And the design looks really nice and consistent too. So I'm ready to start Paisley Shortcut, and this is going to be such a simple, quick design. And how I like to use these designs in a quilt is I'll just basically pick a color, and I'm going to use that design in each of those colors. So if I put a design right here, I'm also going to put it in the other color spaces that are the same. So that's just an easy way to be able to pick designs. You know, once you make one choice, it just kind of fills in all of the other areas, and that just makes the quilt that much easier and faster to quilt. You have less question marks on the quilt about what you're going to use. Okay, so Paisley Shortcut is basically a teardrop shape, so that's what we're going to form first. But we're not going to complete the teardrop. I'm going to come to about right there. And there's about 1/8 of an inch or so between my needle and where I got started stitching. So now I'm going to bounce and swing around. And then before I get close to the line of stitching that's surrounding that area, that echo ditching, I'm going to stop again and bounce again. And you might want to stop like this, just like I'm demonstrating it, you know, so that way you get these really nice direction changes. That might be helpful. I know a lot of quilters struggle with making really nice sharp turns, and if you struggle with that with sharp stippling, you're not alone. Another thing that can be very common is hesitation knots, where you think you're stopping, but you might accidentally take a stitch or two in place. That can create a little knot on the back of your quilt, so try and avoid that. Whenever you stop, take your foot off the foot pedal. Even exaggerate the movement. Jerk your foot away so that way you're not accidentally pressing the foot pedal while you're not moving the quilt. Okay, now let's try and flow through it. I'm going to swing out. Notice I'm going a little bit slower. I'm really focusing on what I'm doing. Come to that sharp point. Now swing back. You can see just how fast this is. Now swing back again. It fills in this space with these little arches. Let's make that just a little bit deeper and go just a little bit faster. You make it deeper by just swinging out and kind of curving that arch shape just a little bit more. Now please feel free to stop anytime you need to, your needle in the down position, to reposition your hands. Free motion quilting is all about control of the quilt, sliding it and moving it smoothly. And if that means that you have to shift things around or wiggle it or rotate it, then that's what you need to do. And at any of these sharp points, the nice thing about those sharp points actually is that they are a convenient place to stop that's virtually undetected in the quilt. You know, a lot of times when we're stitching curvy designs, if you stop, sometimes you'll make a noticeable little wiggle. Like I would not stop in the middle of the arches. That's a spot where if you wiggle a little bit getting started, it'll be really noticeable. So these stops and starts that you've got as you form this arch shape, those are really convenient. So now I'm just shrinking that down, and then I'll stop right on the corner. So that's how we do Paisley Shortcut. Lift my foot and slide it out so you can see it real nicely. Really beautiful design. You just start with that teardrop shape and then you just expand it. Go all the way through that area, and you can change up how it starts if you want it to start on a different corner and come in. I would start it in a narrow corner. It'd be a lot trickier to go this way because your arches are going to get really big when you start with a really big obtuse angle like that. So there we go. That is Paisley Shortcut and Sharp Stippling. I encourage you to give these designs a try and play around with them. Now, one other fun thing that you might want to play with is your quilting scale. So scale refers to the distance between your lines of stitching. And here you can see there's roughly about 3/8 of an inch between these lines. So the distance between those lines is relatively consistent throughout. And that's a nice scale for something like a table runner or a wall hanging. It's going to rest really nice and flat, and the stitching is nice and decorative. But especially if you're doing a table runner, you can push your edge on this and also go a little bit denser. Now, the downside of going denser and stitching on a micro scale is that it takes a little bit more time. But the advantage is you get so much more repetition, you get so much more space to wiggle around and get more chances to do those shapes and make those angles and make those sharp points. So if you're aiming to build skill in a big way and you really want to really knock out a lot of free motion quilting and get a lot of practice in, then shrink your designs down. You don't have to even do it consistently. You can see here in the same block I've got, bigger sharp stippling. In this little patch I've got some denser sharp stippling. That's perfectly fine for a project like this. It's not going to damage the quilt at all, and that's going to offer a very good opportunity for practice and play. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned a lot and you're ready to give Sharp Stippling and Paisley Shortcut a try. Now, if you'd like to see how Sherry is quilting this quilt, she's using some different designs and walking foot quilting. Definitely go and check out her video at wholecirclestudio.com. Now, if you'd like to join in the fun and make the Leaf Peepers quilt with us, all you need to do is pick up a copy of the quilt pattern. You can find that at leahday.com/leaf. And this pattern includes not just the piecing diagrams and all of that good stuff that's typically included in a quilt pattern. We also include detailed information about quilting your quilt too, both Sherry's method and my method. So I hope that you'll come and check out the quilt pattern at leahday.com/leaf. Until next time, let's go quilt.